Hey, well, hello, everybody. My name is Todd Nash. I'm president of the Oregon Cattlemen's Association, and I'm here today with Representative Mark Owens from House District 60. And Mark, you want to further introduce yourself and where you're at and a little bit about your district?
Yeah, thanks, Todd. Appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. Mark Owens, as Todd said, House District 60. House District 60 after redistricting is 37% of the southeast corner of the state. So we're looking at all of Mount Here, Harney, Lake, Grant, Baker, and part of Deschutes. I've been a legislator now for, just a little over 2 years. It's good, Todd. Ag cattle is king in House District 60, kind of like up in your area, Enterprise too. So all is good.
Yeah, well, thank you. You're one of the bright spots that we have down in Salem. We appreciate having a champion down there and you making the sacrifice to leave Burns and expand your territory and take on as much as you have. Mark, for the purpose of today, I wanted to talk a little bit about the hay market and what's going on out there. Besides being a representative, your main day job is being a hay producer, and so do you want to talk a little bit about what's going on with the markets? What kind of is the top end of what hay is selling for, what the bottom end is, and where it's going to?
Yeah, Todd, thanks. As my wife and I joke, or I joke with my wife, my farm affords my political habit. So yes, I'm fortunate enough to be a farmer in Harney County. We raise a lot of alfalfa. We own, manage, and lease several thousand acres. And besides the alfalfa and hay that we raise, I also purchase hay for a hay press up and down the West Coast. So have quite a bit of knowledge on where the hay prices are. As you know, last year we hit some record highs in hay, from the very top hay, supreme hay, to the very bottom hay, feeder hay. Prices were higher than I'd ever seen. And the main thing there, Todd, last year, there wasn't much of a spread between the lower quality hay and the higher quality hay, which is unusual. Normally that spread will stay there, and that can get some reduced costs to some of the hay that we would consider lower end, but is good enough for cattle. We thought that trend would probably stay about even this year, because last year, a lot of it was drought related, not enough water in the West in order to raise the amount of hay for supply and demand. And we knew we were going into another drought, but some parts of Oregon and some parts of the West had a little bit more precipitation. We got out of some of the extreme drought we were, but reality says the West still doesn't have enough water, produce the amount of hay that is needed, not just locally, but for export and for dairies too. So the price started to climb again. December, January, February, it was going up about $5 a ton down in Southern California, where they start production first. Some of the press market actually tried to pull out of the hay at about $310 to $315 a ton, because that was setting some almost some records down there even. And they thought they can control the market. They didn't. They jumped back into the market about $335 to $340. And it continued to increase upwards until even the Hoyt report that I got weekly started reporting numbers that I had not seen before, because they started with a number 4. So we increased into the $400 a ton down in the Central Valley of California. A lot of that ended up going to dairies and export market, because the dairies finally, for the first time, started cash flowing this last year. They started actually, having money to buy hay and stock hay, because they weren't living hand to mouth. Then I guess the perfect storm hit in the West Coast, or especially in Oregon, is all of Idaho got rained on. All of Washington got rained on, and severely hampered the export market again, because you couldn't get the quality with the physical attributes that you need, color and leaf. So we thought hay was going to be around $320 to $330 for the export market in April. And then, like I said, that perfect storm hit, and hay prices jumped about $40 to $50 a ton. So honestly, Todd, in the first 14 days of July, we've been buying export hay, which has to have a good test, has to have good color, good leaf, in Southeast Oregon, from $355 a ton to $382.50 a ton, depending on the location and the quality. But just to put it in perspective, Todd, last year was the most I'd ever paid for a ton of hay was $245 a ton. This year, in the first 14 days of July, we hit $382.50 a ton.
So relative feed value is a number that you work with. Can you describe the top end of relative feed value and what it takes to hit that dairy point, export point, and then the lower end of that, and talk about what you're seeing on the feeder end, the lower quality that doesn't achieve that?
Yeah, so historically, a lot of people have thought of press is just having clean and green would make press. But the press market has actually advanced to the point now where they want what you're considering the same test that dairy wants, and they want clean and green. So one of the contributing factors to the test is relative feed value. Relative feed value is based off of total digestible nutrients, ADF and NDF. It's a mathematical equation to come up with what they think the value of that hay is. So relative feed value, in order to make supreme hay, some of the markets will tell you 180 relative food value. Some will say 185. So we typically go with anything that's over 180 relative food value or over 20% protein will meet the requirements for dairy or meet the requirements for that number one export hay. Then it starts going down into categories below that. So 170 to 185 relative food value would be premium hay. 155 to 170 would be, good quality hay. And that's where you start to, I believe, Todd, break into what we would consider feeder hay. Because then you're still at, proteins of 16 to 18%, or even to go down into that 150 relative food value hay, with 16, 17% protein would definitely be a lower market, probably not even dairy hay. And it's probably going to be the very low end of export hay, but we would consider decent cow-calf hay or decent feeder hay. Feeder hay market is a tough one to pinpoint, Todd, because feeder hay normally is on the lower end of the value of hay that we buy and sell. So therefore, the transportation cost is normally added into it. So it's more geographically located to the price because there's not the amount of top end, so you can't ship it so far. I've been asked this question probably 5 times in the last week from different producers. Called me up and say, "Mark, what's my feeder hay worth?" And I answered the question the same way. I said, "Is it a customer that's been with you? If they've been with you a year in and year out, you still got to make sure they're with you next year." So you have to build that relationship between the cattleman and the farmer in order to make sure that you both can be there next year. So the farmer has to make some money, but the cattleman also has to be in business next year. Our costs have gone up 30%, 30 to 32% from last year. So if you were buying feeder hay for lack of a better number, $200 last year, for the farmer to break even, he's probably selling that to you for $260. I know of a lot of feeder hay in the basin here in Harney Basin that's going anywhere from $235 to $285. I know of triticale hay going from $210 to $250. So if you can find feeder hay at $225 to $250, you're probably doing good. And it needs to be a relationship base.
Okay, thank you. So you want to talk to me a little bit about some of the challenges that you're facing in that 30% cost? I know we have fertilizer, fuel, equipment, and some of the challenges that you're having in supply chain with equipment.
Yeah, so a couple multiple factors there. I just actually ran a fuel report for this last 31 days. This is the first morning in 31 days that I haven't put hay in the ground. So we got through our first cycle. So I'm trying to refine because we've had to actually put a fuel surcharge on what we cost to put up our contract hay. So it's costing us about $2 a gallon to put up hay. Last fall, I stocked up at $2.70 a gallon. The last tanker load that I brought in a couple of weeks ago, Todd, was $5.85. So basic math says it's costing us an extra close to $6 an acre to put up hay. That gets substantial. So that's one of our costs. Fertilizers are over double. Twine is over double. We were able to secure all those, this fall, and you can still buy those products. The one that probably is most concerning is parts. Even on our new equipment, we're running into areas where, that part's not available. We need to try to get that part for you. And I have a real concern if the supply issues that we're having, that you're going to see a lot of tractors, swathers, a lot of equipment parked in fields alongside the road because the part availability is getting real tough. It's actually a more scarier, for lack of a better word, than I've been around before. We've actually bought another tractor this year. We bought another rake this year. We are trading in swathers, and we kept an extra swather because I'm trying to get redundancy, because I'm worried about not being able to keep things going. I was talking to my equipment guy just this morning. He says they're doing okay. He says it's bigger struggle than they've ever had. So I'm concerned.
Yeah, that is concerning. One of the reports that I heard, and a little bit of what I'm seeing here in the far northeast corner of the world, we had a very cool spring, and it was real favorable to grass, and we have tremendous grass. Our tonnage is up on those grass fields at least a ton to the acre, in some cases more than that. In Umatilla County, I was talking to Andy Vanderplant, one of our VPs for Oregon Cattlemen's, and he said that he's seen swathers where he's never seen swathers before. And are you seeing some of that too, where people are trying to capture some hay where maybe they hadn't before?
Not so much as far as, trying to find every corner to cut. I mean, we had a wet spring. We were pretty dire, as you know, like most of Oregon, until April. In fact, a lot of our cattlemen started liquidating herds because there was no place to turn out, and they also saw the price of hay. We've had some good rains, and those good rains have produced, good bunch grass out on the range, good native feed, probably more native feed than we've had since 2017. But a lot of the meadows here in Harney Basin, that amount of rain did not affect them. In fact, you talk to some of the old timers, we had less acreage irrigated this year through flood meadows than they can remember for quite a while. So there wasn't that, halfway medium ground where is there enough hay out there to produce or not. We still have put up less acreage than we will on our flood meadows and less tonnage on our flood meadows, Todd. It's we froze 3 times the second week of June, and I think that affected it. And we did not get enough moisture on our hay ground, produce the tonnage to allow people to go in and cut extra acres than they normally would.
Yeah, we saw it'd be pretty tough on alfalfa here that required more heat than what the grasses did. Yeah, so I think going forward, one of the concerns is availability of water in the West in the long term. We see what's happened down in Klamath area, and some of the restrictions we see with groundwater. Going forward into the future, do we need to be looking into other areas and different means of providing fodder for our livestock?
Oh, yeah, tough one. 17 Western states in water. We're not getting any better as far as, water availability. I mean, we're getting probably less snowfall in some areas. Some areas are getting more, but we're definitely more water constrained, Todd, than we've ever been. Look at our big reservoirs. Look at the groundwater from California to Arizona to Harney County. Ag is no longer going to have the water supplies they used to for the near future, in my mind. Some of the groundwater we're pumping is not being replenished. Surface water is less. So ag in general is going to have to figure out how to produce more with less. As far as stock water for cattlemen, I mean, we've looked at some charts and graphs, and I know you guys know at OCA better than I that the amount of water that it takes to produce a pound of beef is a lot less than it used to be. I don't think we're going to have an issue, with exempt wells like stock wells and availability to pull enough water to feed livestock. But I do believe there's been some interaction between high capacity ag and stock wells that in some areas hasn't been good. That the stock water, they're going to have to go deeper. But I still believe there's always going to be an adequate supply of stock water, even though that I believe that especially groundwater for ag is gone through its golden days and is going to struggle a little bit. So,
yeah, that's going to be a tough pill to swallow, and I know you're in a tough spot there, and you've been working on it and be really transparent on it, and appreciate all your good work there. Mark, a couple of closing thoughts here. Some of the export hay I remember I worked for Jim Petty back in the early 80s, and he was one of the first ones to ship hay out of Wallowa County. And when hay was about $100 a ton here, he was sending it over to dairies in Hawaii. And it was being offloaded over there for $320 a ton. This $300 hay that's being sent out of here now, when it gets to China or its places of destination overseas, what is that worth over there?
Yeah. So riding around with the owner of one of the presses just last week. We were down in Christmas Valley, and we were talking about that. We were grading hay, and he was figuring out what it cost for that ton of hay to be, basically put to the port of China, not to the dairy, but just to the port of China. So that hay that we were bidding 350 to 380 was going to end up in China at 650 to 680, Todd. That's concerning. With the level that we're at, farmers aren't making more money with the reduced yield that they got in alfalfa, at least in Southeast Oregon, and the percent of cost. But where we're at is not sustainable. We're not sustainable in the supplies we're paying, nor what we're paying for hay, or nor what China is paying for hay. My opinion, this doesn't end up good. Something crashes, something comes down. The strength of the dollar, or at least the strength of the dollar until the last 2 weeks, actually even that 650 hay probably even makes it more in China. I can't see the market sustaining the level of activity that it's at now with something happening. So it's expensive there too. And they're in a drought in China too, Todd. I've just learned that the last couple of weeks. So that's probably the only reason they're still trying to buy hay from the United States is they don't have their infrastructure, nor do they have the water to put up the hay this year. So,
yeah. Well, very concerning all the way around. One of the old adages was it's easier to move livestock to feed than it is feed to livestock, because 1,000-pound cow and she'll eat 3,000 pounds in 4 months, and those refined products like milk and cheese and one thing or another, if we could produce them here and export them, it'd make a lot more sense than trying to send over $650 hay. And but any rate, that'll be solved over time. Mark, any closing thoughts, any advice?
Maybe not in the hay market, except hold on. I hope we don't go into a global recession or as a recession in the United States, but I'm concerned. But with that concern, Todd, we still got to remember we live in the best country in the world. We're in ag. We're blessed to be in ag. We're blessed to have the custom and culture and the lifestyle that we've chosen. We got to remember that. We got to make sure that we hug our families, talk to our neighbors, and life is good, even though a lot of times we're concerned about what's happening globally or politically or financially. Hey, we're far better off than most people. So we need to take some pride in that. We need to take some pride that we're ranchers and farmers, and we're doing what we love, and we're doing it in a country that allows us to do that. So
couldn't agree more, Mark. And that's why we love you. That's why we love you down in Salem, and you keep battling away for us. Appreciate all you do. Also want to recognize that Mark is a member in good standing in Oregon Cattlemen's, and shows up to a lot of meetings and sits there through them. Even though he doesn't have a cow there, he represents a lot of cattle in the state of Oregon in the district you have there. So thanks again, Mark, and we'll be visiting soon.
Thanks, Todd, and thanks for all you do. And thank you to every member of Oregon Cattlemen's Association. Be safe.